Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. I felt the need to jump on today because I need to vent. It's vent time. I don't do this often, but I'm going to do it today. It's bad craziness in the world of finance and what's happening with headlines and press and the media. It's so egregiously awful and manipulative. We need to call it out. So, for instance, the thing that really just was the straw that broke the camel's back, there's a financial institution that I've worked with through the years that sent me an email, and they're bullet pointing a bunch of stuff, and they're trying to entice me to join some webinar on investing in the next decade and everything. And then it's got this headline in the email: "The golden era of investing is over." Good grief. Come on, people. It's gotten so ridiculous. It's almost comical. It's like a clown show. So here's where we are. I want to put this in context. I've got a friend of mine I spoke with a few days ago. I think he's retired now or semi-retired, but a long time ago in the 90s, he was a stockbroker. And so I was talking about what's happening in sort of the parade of woke sameness and the globalist bubble and all that stuff. And he made the comment that we have all these managers out there. As a little side note or a little behind the curtains glimpse, in my world, we use the term PM or portfolio manager. A PM may manage something like a mutual fund or other types of pooled investments. Those managers, he was saying, in his view, are really good at their job, and they're constantly devouring information about good versus bad investments, and they're reading up on all kinds of financial reports. And so that's kind of an enticing view. And at one point in history, when I first started working in finance, it was true. It was pretty universally true. But as I sort of patiently waited for him to finish his thoughts, and then told him I didn't use the word quaint, but it's kind of a quaint bygone era that he's thinking of. Kind of like when we used to think of schools as focused on education, and we used to think of pharmaceutical companies as focused on our health. Well, universally, pretty much across the board, the world, I was going to say America, the world has come to the realization that that's generally not the truth, that we have organizations out there. And sorry, I'm getting distracted here because once again, we have an error message, unable to connect to Rumble. All right, well, I guess we're not going live on Rumble today. Oh, well, we'll stop that. Stop Rumble. Whatever, we'll sort that out. It's kind of an ongoing battle. So anyway, the idea that these PMs or portfolio managers are out there looking at the earnings reports and quarterly reports and job growth specific to a company and market sector, and looking at international and national competitors in the landscape, and whether or not they have research and development or filing for new patents, and their cash flow management, any management departures, all that stuff. I call it all fundamentals. Well, that's actually an industry term. We call it fundamentals when you're looking at the fundamental value or lack of value of a potential investment. And yes, he's right. In the real world, that's fundamentally critical. The fundamentals are fundamental. In a broken, false world, we have things like ESG, DEI, and the woke stuff, the corporate equity index, artificially influencing. And what's been allowed to happen is, as far as I can tell, most or many or all, almost all, some large number of those portfolio managers went on to autopilot and just simply decided that allowing corporate to decide and rubber stamp on what is or isn't good for the investment portfolio is fine. So they get paid big money to, in my book, no longer do their job. Their job of going out there and constantly grinding away at doing the analysis on what's a good investment, getting replaced by virtue signaling, which clearly, if you think I'm speaking out of turn with the following comment, go back and watch some of the episodes that I've done in UnWoke Academy, where I talk about now, what are we on, 3-4 years of, I've talked to everybody that I know in the world of finance, and that's a lot of people. I've worked in institutional finance for decades. I know a lot of people, and I can tell you that according to all website searches, all performance reports, all conversations, everything, absolutely 100% of everything that I'm able to get my hands on, I can find no accurate, actual definition of any of them. DEI, ESG, what does it mean? What does it mean? In my world, I mean, it only put that in a better, clearer context. If somebody were to approach you with some suggestion and they say it's good because it'll make you feel good, then by all means, if you think that you'll feel good, you can do that thing. In my world, when you're talking about people managing billions and trillions of dollars on behalf of other people, there is no vague answer that ever works. Never, ever, ever. It does not ever apply. You cannot say in defense of decision making for other people's money that it made you feel good, or that you think that it was probably good in some vague sort of way. That doesn't work. It absolutely does not fly. So if, and I've been saying this for years, if somebody were to come along and say, we've defined the following need and issues socially, economically, culturally, environmentally, whatever, we've developed, we've analyzed it, and we've proved that there's this need and there's value to the investors in changing fundamentally how we analyze, how we invest the money, then I'll say, great, that's a good first step. Now analyze the impact. Because if you can't show that there is beneficial impact, then you also still have nothing. So for instance, if you decide that there's some sort of cultural issue and you're a portfolio manager managing $100 billion and you say, aha, eureka, I've got it. Here is this cultural issue. And I think that if I divert the $100 billion that I invest for other people on behalf of their future and their family and their retirement, I'm going to shift all of that in order to address this. That's step one. Step two has to be, what are you moving it to, and how does it make it better? And how do you analyze and report on it, whatever the answer, whatever the thing you're solving for, how does it make it better? So when we agree to operate in a world that just jettisons all of that and doesn't actually define anything and just says, oh, it's just slap a label on it. It's green. Ooh, green how? And what is it greening? And what is enough green? And what are you doing that you're defining as green? How is green defined? It's maddening and absolutely ludicrous, absolutely preposterous that we've allowed ourselves to get to this place. And what's happened is, let's call it 30 companies. I'm exaggerating. It's maybe 100. I don't know, whatever. There's some number of globalist companies that all piled into the thing and said, hey, portfolio managers, look at us. We're virtue signaling really good. And we have the ESG and the DEI and the CRT and the CEI. We're so good that you need to move all of your investor dollars over to us. And there are companies out there that manage money on behalf of others that rubber stamped it and said, sure, you have those labels now that don't mean anything. They're not defined. So I'm going to move the $100 billion and actually it's more like $36 trillion. We're going to just move all that over to you. You're green. So you're a green company. We're going to invest in you. That is absolutely an outrageous, preposterous place, but we're there. We got there. I've shown it in that Parade of Woke Sameness episode that I did, where I took, if you didn't watch that, here's what I did. I went to a website, financial news reporting agency called Kiplinger. Kiplinger has a list of, in their book and their analysis, their reporters found the top 100 mutual funds in 401k plans in the US. And I started with number one, largest dollar deposits into that mutual fund. And all of the equity funds I went through, I made my way to up to like 36 or something. I compared the top holdings in all of them. And what were they? Virtually identical. Doesn't matter the name that's on the mutual fund or the stated objective. It really, nothing matters in that environment, in that world, except the virtue signaling stamp, that label that's slapped over the company. As a side note, because not everybody knows this, mutual funds aren't of themselves an investment. Mutual funds are simply giving management authorization to somebody else to make the investment decisions for you. So when I talk about the investments being woke and having ESG label and CRT, DEI, whatever, what I'm talking about ultimately is whatever the money truly gets invested in. So now we have an array of different portfolio managers, these mutual fund families out there, families of vastly different sounding mutual funds that effectively all allowed themselves to be corralled into this bubble of virtually identical same companies. Maybe the order changes a little bit, but it's the same companies. And that is absolutely, in my book, a globalist bubble. There are a few connected thoughts. One is, I believe that I have empirically proven that point, that we have a globalist bubble. And I believe that that bubble has to pop. I heard it. I was actually on a financial newscast or a seminar a few days ago. It was a virtual seminar where somebody made an interesting point. At the current valuation for Apple, and I'm paraphrasing what somebody said. It was a little bit tongue in cheek, but kind of true. This person said, if you believe that value for Apple stock, you would have to believe that all of us, all over the world, are going to live in Apple homes, drive Apple cars, use an Apple phone, and stream Apple services. That the value of Apple, where it is right now, is so outrageously high. And yes, that is my opinion, that the stock price is inflated because it's received the inflows of so much money for having put the woke label on themselves and then appealed from Wall Street and other types of investors, all the institutional dollars from mutual funds and things like them. That is an unhealthy environment. And the safeguard, the portfolio manager, those teams of people that used to constantly evaluate fundamentals, I believe that they fell asleep at the switch. Now we have the answer to that. The answer to that came on February 21st from President Donald J. Trump when he issued the America First policy statement. And that throws down the gauntlet. It tells the financial world and capital markets, stop all of the overfunding of the woke globalist cabal and start directing money into free market economy. It's a beautiful thing. I suggest that that's where people should be looking. If you haven't already, talk to your financial advisor. If they're woke and steering you into the same stuff, stop paying. Stop paying for them to do the same thing to you that everybody is having done to them, which is funneling money into a bunch of woke companies. So let's look at that another way. And I want to be clear about this. If your money is going into if you're paying an advisor or planner or broker, whatever they call themselves, some sort of financial advisor, if you're paying them and then they're selecting some mutual funds, and then if somebody like me comes along and does analysis on the mutual funds and finds there's so much commonality and overlap, you might as well be in one mutual fund, and the different names are virtually meaningless, and you're paying the mutual funds themselves, you're vastly overpaying and making a whole bunch of other people, not yourself, money to be in what I'm arguing is a bubble. If you redirect that and start funding the tomorrow that we want to see, which is free market economy and a return to capitalism and the ensuing, I'm going to say inevitable, rebirth of the middle class, that's a perfectly wonderful thing. And I'm going to connect one other thought to that. And that is, if I'm right, and there is a bubble in these stocks, the big globalist, and think pharma for a minute, because in my book, those are not only inflated and artificially inflated, but also you have all kinds of negative headlines, and there's been no reaction that I've seen to the stock price, which means if I'm right and the bubble bursts and the stock prices drop in the future, who's going to be left holding the bag? What's going to happen in my book, in my estimation, is that the whales, the big investors, will migrate out of those stocks, made whole with inflated, overvalued stock prices, and then it will be allowed to drop, leaving the average Joe investor holding the bag. That's when the music stops, and that's when a lot of investors will be very, very upset with the performance of the stock market. I'm air quoting that, the stock market. Don't get me started on the abuse of indexes. But what, in the eyes of the woke cabal globalist left, what could be better than taking your money, putting it in their pockets, and leaving you with a diminished 401k or IRA? What could be better? Blaming Trump for it. I believe to my very core that that's the mission. That's the objective that they have, is going to be to blame Trump when the stock market drops. In the meantime, we have an environment that is abusing, it's using false labels to artificially prop up companies that never should have gotten so overfunded in the first place. And then you have a complicit press that is billing these stock market performance as anything, as they're billing it as reasonable. Like all those conversations about, look, the S&P 500 is up by blah, blah, blah percent, and it's a new high, etc. We know what that is. It's primarily like 40% of it was 7 companies. We have not, I don't believe we've seen that kind of market consolidation probably ever in our history, including during the Great Depression. That means very few companies were holding or are still holding the vast majority of investment dollars. That starves and strangles small business enterprise. It means that there's very little capital for small and mid-sized companies that aren't in that little inside click with the fake label. It also creates that bubble, and that then creates an environment where you and your family and your coworkers and people you care about may very well be the ones left holding the bag, and will wonder why those super rich billionaires became more wealthy. Well, we suffer drastically decreased, deflated 401ks, and then just watch the press. Watch the press. They will pile on Trump, blame it on him, and that will give the political left more power and more ammunition. The same people who've just sucked the market dry and made billions of dollars off of corruption and a corrupt marketplace and corrupting Wall Street with that woke left stuff, ESG, DEI, those same people will then say, look at the bad thing Trump did. He's bad and he caused the market to drop. Hogwash. They created it, and it's up to us to get the message out, to get the people that you care about out of harm's way. Watch my episode called The Globalist Bubble. That will give you everything you need to know, and then take the information that we're putting out there on non-woke investment alternatives. Vote your values. What was the expression? There was somebody earlier today that said they were talking about how we spend our days and the things that we buy. And basically their point was, you're voting with your wallet hundreds of times per day. You're voting for what survives and what thrives. Those companies out there that you're putting money into, those are the ones that are getting rich. And then many of them are coming back and using their corporate profits to abuse us. The same thing is true in your investment portfolio. Open up that statement, take a look at what you've got, and get your money. If nothing else, even if you don't care about the moral value system and the just gross corruption of many of the leaders of these mega corporations that just abuse us, even if you don't care about that, well, first of all, I hope you do. But even if you don't, get out and get yourself out of harm's way and take away that arrow from the quiver of the left. And I swear, I know that they're going to deploy it. They're going to make the market crash. Those call them 30 companies. By the way, I think the average CEO compensation last year from that small little group, the average was over $16 million. That's their income from 1 year. Average. Some of them were higher. They have just taken the abuse and that consolidated market. They've just sucked money out of it, and now they're willing, I strongly suspect, will be willing to let the market drop, because then average Joe investor is holding the bag and they can blame Trump. That's my position. This has been another brief episode of UnWoke.Academy. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.